not to scream, not to have grotesque, rotting feet. Had she expected them to nod to her as she dutifully changed their pillowcases? "Hyde-Lees, you're early," stated without emotion. The matron, Mrs. Thwaite, had arrived on the ward. She had the sort of gaze that took everything in at once, travelling, assessing, judging. Her eyes swept over Georgie. "We are very protective of our officers," she said, as she started to walk down the centre of the room to the far end, with the expectation that Georgie would follow. The matron demonstrated the sort of posture that made you question your own. "I've heard very good things," Georgie managed to say. "Of course. Our officers are first priority and last priority. If you neglect them in any way, we cannot be expected to keep you on." Georgie nervously eyed the men. Willie had not been impressed to hear she was working at a war hospital. "You're giving up all that time," he'd said. She had responded stiffly that she preferred to think of it as giving time rather than giving up time, but he was not convinced. Never mind. In time he would figure out why she was really here. "Colonel Fraser," the matron was saying, walking down the line of beds, gesturing sharply to each man as they went past. This man was sleeping with his lips turned inwards, as though he were trying to suck his face in through his mouth. "Captain Christie," had curled his hand over the stained yellow bandage that covered his eye. Captain Emery May was covered from head to toe with a blanket. Lieutenant Grey, staring at the wall, his face pale orange with dry scales, was the young man who had been screaming. They kept on towards the door. Second Lieutenant Pike was the man with the rotting feet, and on the other side of the room an older man, Major Hammond. Although this last man was asleep, the matron pinched the edge of the white bedsheet, gently lifting it to reveal the wound down the Major's side. It was a test for Georgie. The wound resembled a crude, dotted map of Norway, long, lumpy, filled with blood, tissue, and ooze, and interspersed with fine white stitches where, the matron reported, the doctor had extracted the shrapnel. It was clear to Georgie that these words were fictions. Extract was far too clean a word when you were talking of meat and bone. As Georgie looked down, the Major shifted in his sleep, and his wound winced. A sack of mustard-coloured pus drooped, threatening to fall on the sheet. Georgie did not take her eyes from it, clenching her fist hard against her hip. Mrs. Thwaite turned to Georgie and offered a cool smile. "All right, Hyde-Lees." She didn't wait for an answer. "You can begin with the floors. Start in the upstairs hallway, then the stairs back through the kitchen. Upstairs there is one bed that needs to be stripped and made. Then mop the ward." She pointed to a mop and an empty bucket with a rope handle and headed out to the other room. Georgie took the bucket and went straight to the basin. She tried not to picture the man's skin, the bubbled texture where tissue and blood mixed. She took the bucket upstairs and mopped as if it were a noble pursuit, as if she herself were fighting a war. When she returned after mopping the entire upstairs, there were no other hospital staff on the ward. She slid the mop along the floor, ignoring the new twinge in her back. She couldn't imagine doing this again tomorrow. She was trying to concentrate only on the mop and not think of anything else. Still, she was wondering how she could manage to get out of this, how she could slink away with no one noticing. But when she glanced at the clock, she saw her shift was almost over. "First day's the worst," Second Lieutenant Pike called to her. She stopped beside his bed. Unlike the others, he was unshaven. From here she could see the individual hairs of his stubble, his skin stretched as he smiled. She held the mop in one hand. "It's not so bad," she said. "Come on, it's horrid."